Well, I think what we can do, I'm going to read our opening prayer, then David will be able to lead to present his. It's always a surprise to me too. I don't know if it's going to be prose or poetry, so we'll see what he comes up with this time. I'll read our prayer in English this time. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. You have sanctified us through your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves in things of Torah. Amen.
Amen.
I want to reread the English a little differently. Because it gives you remember we talk about literature and what words we emphasize when we read. So blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe. You have sanctified us through your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves in things of Torah. So I'm just putting the emphasis on different words.
Yeah.
But you get a totally different meaning. So anyway, David, you're up.
Well, thank you. I wonder if any of you were up this morning to see the launching of the Webb Space Telescope. Wasn't it gorgeous? It was perfect and wonderful. Really.
Yeah.
It was
My
cloudy.
quotation today in honor of Webb actually comes from something that was said 56 years ago last night as the Apollo 8 spacecraft was orbiting the moon.
Yes.
And each of the astronauts had something to say. So I really I think it's appropriate now as we begin Torah to quote the entire thing, which I would like to do. We are now approaching lunar sunrise. And for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was unformed and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, a second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together under one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close tonight with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth. Thank you.
Very good. Very well done, David. I like that. No, I think that
Pastor Bruce, good morning and
yes,
happy,
morning,
happy,
Pastor.
merry, and healthy.
Christmas.
Thank you, and to you as well. All of you, just Shabbat Shalom.
To you too.
Didn't expect to see you today.
That's right.
Well, I'm out of quarantine as of today, so that's good. And Karen's uncle is out of quarantine, and him and his daughter are coming over for lunch. So I have a little bit of time here this morning. I do have some preparation to do in about an hour. So.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Yes.
Teaching us
Well,
with your presence.
To you,
What I-
to you and your congregation, a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holiday.
Thank you.
Yes. what I'd like to do is, because some of the more knowledgeable people will be leaving in about an hour, maybe it's good to get right into the meat of the Torah that we're about, Torah sections that we're about to read, and then we can have a little more. We can relax more. We don't have to be on our toes as much when the rabbi leaves and pastor leaves. Like
Oh, we're never on our toes.
that.
We're always relaxed.
Oh yeah. Okay. So we are now beginning Exodus chapter 5, verse 1.
We've
Yep.
caught up to ourselves, incidentally.
Oh,
Yes,
It's
yes.
this week's Torah portion. Right. Okay.
And so it's going to take us longer to get through. It may take a few days to go through, but it's one of the things that this happens every so often, Rabbi, that we have that we play catch up.
yeah.
Well, just put some mustard on it.
I was waiting for that response from someone. Okay. So who would like to read, starting with verse 1 and
The word Moses went to Aaron, went up and said to Pharaoh,
Yeah.
yeah, after Moses and Aaron, yes, you could do that, sure.
yeah, afterward Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go that they may celebrate a festival for me in the wilderness. But Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should heed him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go.
Okay, let's stop at that point because there's a lot that is being said in these two verses. And so the afterward part, as you remember from last week, Moses and Aaron spoke with the elders and showed the signs that God had shown him to, and then commanded Moses to say that God understood their plight, and God was with them, and to show the miracles that God can do. Moses threw down the staff, and also which turns into a serpent, and he picks it up again, and it goes back into a staff, and then and then after that he puts his hand inside his clothing, and then comes and pulls it out, and it's all scaly, puts it back in, and the scaliness is gone. So this has been a theme that has been repeated several times. So that's what the afterward means. And so now they've gone to Pharaoh. We know that they have moved into this area and down in Egypt, and now Moses is going to say something to the Pharaoh. Michael, would you like to repeat what Moses says? It's the last half of the verse 1.
The last half.
The last half, which in quotations.
Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may celebrate a festival for me in the wilderness.
Okay. Yes, Ricky.
Well, God is telling Moses to say that, to basically say a lie. I mean, and also, aside from the fact that he's lying, what festival are they celebrating at this point? I didn't know we had any yet. So there's sort of two things in there that bother me.
Okay. So why don't we discuss those two things first, and then we'll come to another. Is this being deceitful? That's the first part.
Right.
Anyone?
Mhm.
Okay, I'll jump in.
Please.
No, I don't see it as being deceitful at all.
Yeah.
Moses's petition to the Pharaoh has two parts. One with the same long-term end. One is to introduce whichever term you want to use, God, Adonai, Yahweh, to the God of Israel, to Pharaoh, and then also to acknowledge to the Israelites that the God of whom they have been hearing through all these centuries is still a part of their lives,
Right.
and that is worthy of a pilgrimage. That is worthy of celebrating that God has remembered them. God, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not that they're going to be freed within the next, week or whatever it is, but that now is the time for us to reassert ourselves as the people of this particular God.
Okay.
Okay. Don, you beat Pastor Bruce by a hair.
Well, to me it seems deceitful. And the reason is that God has already told Moses that he is going to harden Pharaoh's heart and not let him go. So God is pulling Pharaoh's strings, and it's preordained what's going to happen. It's not as if Moses has made the request and Pharaoh is mulling it over. I mean, it's a fait accompli. So to me, it seems conspiracy.
Okay. I'm going to jump to Pastor Bruce, and then I'll ask for statements by everyone else first. Pastor Bruce.
A conspiracy theory, eh? Is that what you're saying?
The first.
Okay. What I was noticing, if you go backwards to Exodus 3:18, there's a nice word that's missing from this quotation that God had told them, and that is the fact that "na" is not here, and that's please. Not that it would have changed Pharaoh's mind, but Moses did not say everything exactly as God had commanded him to. He forgot please from Exodus 3:18.
So how do you differentiate? That's a very good point that you're making. So how do you differentiate a commandment from a polite address?
Well, you have to look at the one, a command, you have to look at the commander. Who is the commander of the commandment? And a polite thing is one thing, but a command is all important depending who's making the command, who the commander is. In this case, it's God.
When I was in the Air Force, I had a commander who always predicate everything every order with the word please, which was different. I don't know, those of you who have served in different militaries and like that, did they just say, this is what you shall do? This is my order, or did they do it as a request? Yes, Steve. Steve, you're muted.
Or you unmute.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Well, I'd like to respond to your question, Marty, but also go back to the original question about Was
Yes.
God conning, or was there some sort of deception here?
Okay, good.
No, first of all, as far as your, putting a military command in a polite form, that's back in that. I remember a section, I've got an interest in the Civil War, and I remember, seeing the movie of Gettysburg and how the orders were issued, and probably reflects the way they were, is, they never just said, okay, this is what you do now. Somebody would ride up and say, General Lee sends his compliments. And, then it was like, very gentlemanly. So I guess your officer was a callback to that chivalrous age of the of the old school military, where first of all, oh yeah, your compliments, my compliments, sir, and then gentlemen, in referring to all the officers, a gentleman, not saying, hey guys, this is what you do, but they're all gentlemen. Now, as far as the the request to go out into the wilderness and just celebrate God for 3 days, I think we have to remember that this is a story, and that a story must have drama and tension. So the original request was a humble one, was, just give us 3 days to celebrate God. And the story is going to demonstrate to us that, well, he didn't even give the 3 days. Pharaoh didn't even give the short furlough to the slaves. So we're going to see how difficult it's going to be to actually free the slaves. It's going to be a real effort. And sure enough, it does turn out to be an effort. It requires 10 plagues. There's a principle in Talmudic logic that is actually derived from Greek logic, where it's called mehakal el kaved. I'm not. How would you translate that?
It's Kal v'chomer.
Kal v'chomer might be a little more exact here. That you can have a circumstance that is a lot lighter, a lot easier. And if that circumstance is not allowed, then it's how much more so that when you're asking for more, that's not going to be allowed either. You could just assume that it won't be. So obviously, they're not going to be freed with no effort, since they couldn't even get a short furlough of 3 days.
Very good, Steve. There's several comments. I know Rabbi had his hand up for
Helene did
bit,
first, actually.
but Helene usually has to leave in a while. So let me, if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to let Helene go first, and then I know Don wanted to say something in the Rabbi. So Helene, you're on.
You're so kind, Marty. You really are, and I do appreciate the few minutes I have with you. But I was thinking, commandments, requests, please, it depends on the tone of voice. It depends on the way you stand. And see, if I say to you, please sing Christmas carols, or, oh, it would be nice to join you to sing Christmas carols, by the way, which I did. But the question is, what is the tone? What is your message with your body,
Right.
with all of these? You have to think about that.
Yeah. Think about when your mother corrected you. How the word please could be emphasized or diminished.
Right?
Well stated. Well stated. Rabbi, you had your hand up. Should I let Don go first?
Well,
Or do you want to go
let me
because
let
you
me
did
just
have your hand up
do this
first?
quickly, picking up on a number of things that were being said. That
Sure.
Pharaoh's response is not, wait a minute, I can't let all the people go. I need the workers. I need the, da, 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 da. His response is, and this
Yeah.
takes into consideration what everybody was saying, is I don't even know who you're quoting. You're
Right.
saying, thus says the Lord, I'm God. Who is this? Who is this God? Never heard of him before. Yeah, him, her, it, they, whatever. Never heard of that God before. Why should I listen to you? So, whether it's polite, whether it's body language, whether it's please, whether it's not, it's, I don't even know what you're talking about.
That was going to come up next, but that is
Right.
exactly one of the situations here.
Yeah.
But yes, Don. I'll shift over to Don.
I come back to your original question, Marty. In 4 years in the Air Force, I never received a command that was, please.
I just want to interrupt you for 1 second. That commanding officer, he would give pep talks every so often, and he would just say, "Just don't embarrass me."
We've had a
It
rare
was
one.
a very unusual commanding officer.
Yes.
The others I had different.
My other question, I'm going to come circle all the way back to my earlier
Sure.
question, is I do not understand if Pharaoh is under the command of God, even though he doesn't know it. He just, his free will is suspended. He cannot do otherwise and refuse Moses' request. So, I'm not very versed in Talmudic studies, but this must have been before by the scholars, and I just wondered, what is the answer to that?
Okay, you did break up a little bit.
How do the rabbis answer how Pharaoh could have answered Moses otherwise than to refuse, since it would make God a liar? If the Pharaoh had assented to Moses' request and said, sure, but how about 2 days instead of 3 days? If he said anything else, no, he would make God a liar. God already promised this.
They don't, the rabbis don't see, the commentators don't see, I understand what you're asking, Don. The rabbis don't see it as a lie. They see it as Pharaoh's, what's the best way to, Pharaoh's lines in the script. Okay, and like Steve was saying, there has to be tension in the story. Okay, so we who have read everything, we've already been foretold that Pharaoh's heart will be hardened. Doesn't mean that it's going to be hardened as of day one. It might be later on in the story, and indeed the phrase changes in the way that it describes Pharaoh. And in the long run, Pharaoh winds up actually doing teshuvah and doing repentance, and he's and he gets forgiveness from God. So it like you say, it's a particular narrative. They fall back on the no past, present, future, but these are the lines of the play. God's going to harden his heart, but in the meantime, God is also going to make Pharaoh play this role of antagonist to Moses and see what would lead the Egyptians astray. That's the way the classical interpretation would take it.
Well, there's a lot of people have to suffer and die for that to happen. But I mean,
Yes, true.
So I'm still. I hear what you're saying, Rabbi, and thank you. But I'm
Doesn't
still
mean that you have to agree with it by any means.
agree. It's that I'm kind of. It seems like something so easily skipped over that God not only said He's going to harden Pharaoh's heart, went further and said, I'm going to come down on him like a ton of bricks. And so it's foretold.
Mhm.
Anyway, I'll go curl up in my corner and mull that over.
We'll be
Okay.
coming. We come back to the phrase and that conversation and the accusation a number of times over the
That's
next
right.
few chapters. Yeah.
Pastor Bruce and then Gail.
Just in 5:2, it was interesting. I was looking at some different commentaries, and y'all are familiar with Sarna, yes?
Oh, yes.
Okay, he was the one that I found most interesting in this, is that he goes back to Moses's first response from the burning bush,
Mm-hmm.
and he says that, you know, Moses's first response was, well, who am I? And Pharaoh's first response to hearing about this God was, well, who are you? and it I just thought that was very, very interesting, because we've talked a lot about Moses being humble, and Pharaoh obviously doesn't seem humble at this point, but per Don's thoughts, you know, what does he do? Well, God does better than this 3 strikes and you're out rule.
Yeah.
He gives him 9 warnings, apparently, before the most severe or whatever. But I'm just saying that in this case, I just thought it was interesting that Moses's response was, who am I? And Pharaoh's response was, who are you? To God.
Okay. Yeah. Well, in Pharaoh's defense, he had never heard that
Right.
name for God.
Right.
Yeah, you know, because remember, Moses hears the name for the first time. We hadn't heard it for over 400 years.
Right.
So,
Right.
so by the time, you know, it's understandable. And I can understand Don's approach. Depends who's telling the story. Getting back to what Steve says. It's our story. It's our perspective on things. It's not the Egyptians' perspective on things. They would look at it a different way. They would say, oh my goodness, this was a horrible, horrible thing that befell us. The victor usually tells them, is the one that is the purveyor of the story. So the truth is somewhere in between, if you will. That's a modern approach to things. But back then, to the victor, the victor got all the spoils. Okay, including the historical account. And so that's why this is. It's also interesting. I thought you were going to read something else from Sarna. But let me address Gail, and then I'm going to go back to this. So what I wanted to mention here. Yes, Gail.
Okay, I'm kind of interested in the last part of verse 3, because they've explained to the Pharaoh that this is our God, okay,
Mhm.
and that they need to do this. But then he says, or they say to the Pharaoh, he will strike us with an epidemic and the sword. It's like he's not threatening the Pharaoh. He's
We
threatening.
didn't get there yet, Gail.
Oh,
Okay.
I thought we did that.
No, we just did 1 and 2.
Chapter 2.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
But before we go to what you're saying, we're
well,
going to
keep that
come
in
back to
mind.
you. We're going to come back to you.
Okay.
Quoting Sarna also, there's some things that are interesting. We have mentioned this. The narrative moves to a new phase in the tragic history of Israel and Egypt. The new Israelite leadership seizes the initiative with a diplomatic approach. It ends in failure. And the plight of the people becomes an issue in Egyptian public policy. It is now that the struggle for freedom begins in earnest. This chapter serves as an introduction to the plagues. Okay. So this is a form of diplomacy, according to Sarna also. Gail, would you kindly read verse 3, unless there are further comments on verses 1 or 2 and 2.
And then I have nothing more to say about it. I'll just read it.
Okay.
No, wait, Rabbi has his hand
Yeah,
up.
just a clarification. The Sarna that you're quoting is Nahum Sarna,
Right.
okay, the biblical professor, as opposed to his son, Jonathan Sarna, who is professor at Brandeis and is now considered the dean of all the American Jewish historians. So we need to be, they
I
each have their
apologize.
own yichus and credibility in in scholarship. So we should
Okay.
probably say Nahum Sarna rather than just Sarna.
Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. Gail, you're on.
Okay. And I have a question right off the bat. And they said, now I don't know whether Aaron says 2 words and then Moses says another 2, or who they is speaking. Okay. And they said, the God of the Hebrews has communicated with us. Let us go on a trip of 3 days in the wilderness so we may sacrifice to the Lord our God, or else he'll strike us with an epidemic or with a sword, like the Pharaoh would care. Period.
Okay. What comments do you come to your mind?
Come to my mind? I had a question. Yeah. No, I'm saying, I mean, why would the Pharaoh care if they're going to be hit with an epidemic or the sword? It's not affecting him.
Well, how would it affect him?
Well, he wouldn't have the workers, but they're slaves, so
Yeah.
who cares? But,
Yeah.
He's thinking about all that. It comes out, in the
Yeah.
further discussion. So, but yes, Steve.
Yeah. But again, just going back to that theme of diplomacy, that this is diplomacy. There's no threatening yet in the story. Moses is not saying, you better watch out. Our God is all powerful. Our God will strike you with plagues, if you don't concede. He's just saying, well, the reason we're coming to you is because we're afraid for our own welfare. There could be, a plague among us. Our God might get very annoyed that we haven't gone out to worship him, and he might inflict us with some kind of punishment. So again, this is more part of the story structure.
Right.
Because that's what
it's a
kings
build-up.
do.
That's
what
right.
despots do. Right. If you're commanding us to, sorry, Marty, it's not like your commanding officer, but God tells us to go out into the wilderness and make a pilgrimage and offer sacrifices. And if we don't do it, there's a punishment. Pharaoh can relate to.
Yeah. Those are all very good points. Very good points. Yes, Don.
This must be the origin of Jewish guilt, because Moses is, if you don't do this, it'll be on you when we get punished. So just the perspective is not that Pharaoh's going to get clobbered, but that do what we ask for, or we're going to get it. I don't know. I think that's kind of.
Well, there was no credibility. The Pharaoh didn't see anything credible. He asked, well, who is this God? Who is the Lord? He couldn't see him. Moses couldn't say. And there was nothing there for Pharaoh to be afraid of other than these words. He couldn't see. It wasn't based on anything like the gods of Egypt. They had a God for this and a God for that. And so he could not relate to, and he just didn't take it serious enough. It took him 10 of these, 10 times 10 plagues for him to get the message. And still, when he let the Israelites go, they followed him, and as the story went, the ocean crashed down on the Egyptians. So,
But at this point, Pharaoh has nothing to be afraid of because Moses is saying it's us that's going to get punished, not you.
Right, that's,
Yeah.
Anyway,
Now,
This God is all powerful, and we're all subject to God's whims and decisions, et cetera, et cetera.
now here's a play on it could also be a play on words. As everyone was speaking, this just came to me. When they use the word us, our, we, we are all taking it to interpret this as just the Israelites because it's their God.
right.
But what if God is most powerful over everything? The Lord, okay, as one of the interpretations, God Almighty, okay. Could that we or us, our, could all of that imply that this could also be a fate for the Egyptians? Okay, Gail had her hand up first.
I'm
Steve
sorry,
and Rabbi.
I just think it's a very weak opening gambit on the part of Aaron and Moses. And, they didn't explain, who is the God? Pharaoh says, who is this guy? Who's God? And they say, well, he's our God. Okay, well, that doesn't help the Pharaoh. And then he says, and if our God doesn't, we don't do what we're supposed to, he's going to punish us. Again, the Pharaoh, why should he care? It seems like a very weak opening to me. And that's
Okay.
fine. And I know what we're leading into the bigger story, but it's just a very weak opening gambit. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. We can look at it that way. Steve?
Well, just going back to my sort of technique of doing a dramatic analysis, sort of a literature analysis of what's happening here. This is the very commonly used novelist technique of foreshadowing. Okay, there is a mention. This is the first mention of a plague, which is very significant. Okay, they're not saying, okay, this is going to be a plague of the Egyptians. It's not tied into the end of the story, but this already sets the stage for this is a God who has the ability to inflict punishments when things are not done to his satisfaction. So it already introduces that element for later, which will tie up the story and make it a very important story, a very dramatic story. The reason that this story is told and retold every year is because it's also not only because it's an important story for us as a people, but it's also a good story. If it weren't a good story, maybe the enthusiasm would wane after a few years.
Good point. Rabbi?
I hear the question of the Marty that you were leading into is that all of us would be destroyed, Israelite and Egyptian together. But I think the Hebrew would have been phrased differently if that was the intent.
Okay.
Okay. I certainly would think that he's talking about that we would be punished for not obeying God's command. And I was wondering if maybe by the we they only meant Aaron and Moses. Just the messengers
That's
would
right.
be destroyed. But that certainly wouldn't have any impact on the Pharaoh. Rather, but if all the Israelites were going to be destroyed by pestilence and whatever, that does have an impact for Pharaoh. So I don't know if it's weak or not as an opening gambit.
Actually, I just want to say something before I forget it. Uh, this scenario and our discussion reminds me a little bit of Kant and his categorical imperative.
Mhm.
What do you do if somebody comes to your home, comes, I need a place to hide, somebody is going to kill me. And you say, and you provide them with shelter. And then somebody comes over to your home and knocks on the door, you open the door, and they said, and you hear the words, is so-and-so here? And you answer, no. Is that a lie?
Because
Or would
depending on
you
how you
Yes,
protect
define
it
the
is.
person,
Yes, it is.
lie to protect the person, or would you? But it could be also taken literally.
Right.
Well, you lie to protect, you would lie if someone needed to be protected from harm.
Okay, but did he lie? Did the person?
Yes. Yes.
Somebody was trying to say,
Chris.
Chris.
Sorry. Yeah. My camera's not working. But yes, definitely it's a lot. And you become a co as a in a law kind of a thing. You are as guilty as he is for defending that, for protecting that in the law.
Well, suppose you interpret here as meaning right in the doorway or in the house, but not, you've forgotten to mention the closet.
Your intention will still be your intention is to protect, but the law will still call you illegal to do that to the law.
So even if it meant the guy could come in, then you would say the guy, your intended victim is in my home and I want to, and yes, he's here.
Right.
Okay. So the intended victim would be killed.
Probably both in some cases, if you're going to that extreme.
So it's okay to commit suicide by telling the absolute truth?
Well, Marty, the piece that's missing is the context.
Yes.
Is this an authority figure who's looking for someone who's fleeing?
That's right.
Is it an avenger? So you need to know that context,
and you don't
to
know
respond
that
the way Chris is responding.
That's right. You do not know that. You do not know that the whole story. So knowing these things, we deceive ourselves without knowing the entire picture.
Right.
And so the fellow who wants to do the killing is deceiving himself. The fellow who is trying to figure out how he's not going to get overly involved in this is also deceiving himself, all to avoid a lie.
No persecution, I guess.
Well, suppose it's your wife or husband, and they say, "How do I look, dear?" Okay. Do you say, "Well, you look ugly today. You put your makeup on incorrectly. You didn't put on the right shirt or tie." There are different ways of handling that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to get in. I want to get David. I know you're leaning back in the chair. You're making room for Wendy. You have to unmute yourself.
For the last point you made about if your wife says, "How do I look?" and or they just come home with new clothes and they say, what do you think?" My sister has a wonderful philosophy on that. And she said, if whatever they're asking you can easily be changed, for example, a dress, and then you don't look at it, you don't look good in that, they can return it. But if whatever they're asking you, I guess we're talking husband-wife kind of a thing, cannot be changed, then you say, "You look okay."
There you go. One of the things, it becomes very important to separate that out, because if it's to help someone else, if it's to do something, for the community or another individual, we call it a little white lie. And so are those okay? First Don, then the rabbi.
A human life is okay to do that. For human life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Don and then rabbi.
But a lot of points coming up.
And Steve, I'm sorry.
A lot of points. I was trying to get back to Steve and Gail's point, but for your points, Marty, I don't really see a connection between situational ethics and this section of Exodus. But anyway, going back to the idea of a weak open gambit and the literary technique, what we're seeing is the start of an escalation, literary technique of escalation here. First there's a no, then there's a no. It gets more and more tense. But right now, Moses is playing a weak card at the bottom step of this escalation. And I mean, it's like, he didn't pull out his rod. He probably left that at security. It was in Pharaoh's combination. But this wouldn't work as a literary passage unless it went up step by step. The plagues and the destructions. That's all I had.
Okay. I know Steve and Rabbi also had hands up, so I don't remember who was first.
I think
though.
Steve was first.
Oh,
Steve,
well,
okay. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Steve.
well, and it's actually good that I'm first, because I want the rabbi to confirm what I'm saying, hopefully, so it doesn't look like I'm pouring baloney on the group. Okay, I was going to use another phrase, but
As long as it's beef bologna, it's all right.
But supposedly the Talmud also discusses the white lie in one instance, and there is a discussion between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the house of Shammai and house of Hillel, about what do you do if you're at a wedding and the bride is kind of a miskite, and are you honest or not? And the house of Shammai says, no, you must be honest. And the house of Hillel, as I recall, says, no, you can lie. That's okay. But you're a guest at a wedding. So am I remembering right?
You are.
Well, you are. The overriding concept is shalom bayit. It's for the sake of, for peace and acceptance in the home and in the family.
Right.
There are a number of occasions, we talked about it in the Parshat Shavua class earlier this month. There are a number of occasions. The most famous one is between Sarah and the men who announced that she will be pregnant and whatever, and that she lies for the sake of Abraham's his self-esteem, if you will. And Chris is right, and certainly Jewish law basically says yes, you can lie, whether it's a little white lie or whether it's a major lie of, as in the case that Marty's talking about, for the sake of saving a life. But that's it. That's in a larger sense, saving a life, saving someone's reputation. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, Jewish law is very clear on that.
Yes.
But you need to know, again, there's always the qualification of what's the motivation of the person in Marty's case. What's the motivation of the person who is coming to find the one who's been fleeing? And what, I mean, if it's a criminal, that's a different story. But then you get into lots of different Talmudic innuendo. I'm going to have to leave in a few moments also. If you don't mind my just saying, while we were talking, I got a post on my phone that the feeding tube is out. So
Great.
the baby's doing
Great.
much better.
Excellent. Shalom, Rabbi.
We've got a couple of minutes, so
we do. Okay. By the way, this very discussion, I believe it was Bill Moyers a number of years ago on PBS TV that had a collection of rabbis and ministers and lawyers and speaking on the subjects of morality and ethics. And he would pose questions, and
it was in the context of an interpretation of Genesis.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
I forget what it was called, but Norman Cohn, one of my close friends and teachers, was one of the participants.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So so I highly recommend that for those interested to review that, because the whole series on ethics was just unbelievable. It is very good. It's also available in book form for those interested. Yes, Michael.
You mentioned morality and ethics.
Uh-huh.
How would you define the difference between them, if there is a difference?
Well, that's a loaded question, Michael, because I'd like you to repeat what you have mentioned to us before.
Me?
You have hit the nail on the head. So why don't you go ahead and mention it?
Well, what I recall mentioning is the word ethics would be more leaning towards a law, something to do with the law, where the other, forget what I can't remember thing. Ethics and morality is said over the general population.
Okay. It's more universal, if you will.
Universal, yeah. It's because, as I understand, I haven't attended law school, but other than a couple of early and many years ago for a few subjects, but at the end of law school, I think there is given a class on ethics. What is ethical?
Mm-hmm.
Ethic. It's not stated as moral, but that's what I would think the difference is. So I don't know. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
No, I'm just saying that I think sums up anyone else. So I guess that's it. It's good, Michael.
Marty?
Yes.
An invitation, Thursday, February 24th. I'm kicking off a 4-part series of the teachings of some important historical and contemporary rabbis. And that February 24th, that particular discussion will include not answers, but responses to Michael's question as well, to ethics and morality within the context of Jewish law.
I'm glad we opened this discussion.
Right. So save the date.
Okay. We sure will. That I think is very.
And I'll say Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. Many of our discussions that we've had deal with the moral behavior, and sometimes ethics can be in conflict with moral behavior. That's why I refer to that discussion on the Bill Moyers program. And if the rabbi is going to have this type of session, I think that's going to be very important. In my philosophy club, we're going to be discussing this. Where they overlap and where they differ. So it's not unique, but every time we see these stories, and Don is like our morality tester and an ethical tester. And it becomes important because it doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% of the time. And that's one of the things that comes out of the Bill Moyers discussions too. And they have very knowledgeable people from back then. So anyway, Don, thank you for opening this discussion. I think it was very important because then we can look at certain things. Hey, hi, Suzanne. Merry Christmas to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Marty. I'm sorry, I slept through 2 alarms.
Oh, my goodness. That was too much wassail.
Obviously. And my husband came and got me. And I just, a little bit of Torah is better than none at all.
Okay, well, you missed, we've only gone through 3 verses. Any further discussion on verse 3? We're on Exodus chapter 5, verse 3, and about to move on to verse 4. So any further discussion on verse 3? Then why don't we go on to verse 4? This sort of, Gail, did you have anything to add to that discussion? Do you want to make mention of what you said before?
No, it's just that a lot of decisions, you're talking about morality and ethics, unless it affects you personally, it does make a difference. And that's what happens with Pharaoh, of course, jumping to the very end of all the plagues. Until it affects him personally, he really doesn't care. So there you are.
That's right. That's right. So do you want to, Michael, would you like to read? We'll go back and forth here. How about verse 4, Michael?
But the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why do you distract the people from their tasks? Get to your labors. And Pharaoh.
Okay, go ahead, read 5 too.
And Pharaoh continued, the people of the land are already so numerous, and you would have them cease from their labors.
Okay. This sort of supports what Gail was getting after. Any other comments? Any comments about, you know, one of the things that we haven't mentioned, and it's easy to overlook, when Moses and Aaron are speaking, they are using the words of God, and they say it's really God throwing up a challenge to the Pharaoh. This is a festival for me, not you, to the Pharaoh. Okay, and I think that is just something we left out of our discussion. So,
Marty?
Yes, Steve. Yes, Steve.
You know what? What stands out to me in this, final quote from Pharaoh, okay, is he's really pulling rank on them. and actually viewing them as part of this slave population, which is another sort of implied part of this story. Is not only is he dismissing what they're saying, but he's also saying, hey, you guys are slaves too. You're taking up my time. Go back to your work. You know, you've got stuff you're supposed to be doing, you know?
Exactly.
He just assumes that they're part of the slave population too. You're just goofing off. Now get back and stop wasting my time. So
That's a good way of summarizing it.
very much pulling rank on them all together. Again, adding a little bit of drama to the situation that, it's they're not having a discussion here as equals.
Okay. Now, I agree. I think it's a very good observation. Any other comments? What about verse 5? Is that a statement being directed towards Moses and Aaron? Or is it also a statement being made to the other court viziers that are there? That these people are so numerous, how can we, let them take off all that time and cease from their labors, and we have work to be done? So or is it for both? Yes, Gail.
Well, there's another thing that might be implied. I'm not sure that it's true, that
Please.
if Pharaoh makes Moses and Aaron look like the people that have made things harder for the Hebrews, then they're not going to follow their leaders. So that weakens the opposition. So
Yes.
that's kind of that's a good maneuver from his point.
From his point, yes.
Right, yeah.
Yes, Don.
That verse 2 refers back a few chapters when Pharaoh felt threatened because the Hebrews had multiplied so much. And, I think this kind of just emphasizes an underlying fear that keep them in check or they're going to really give us trouble.
Okay. I think that's a good observation too. I think that we have, we're sort of on the right track. I have not come up with any other any other comments other than the people of the land may it implies the common laborers, and was perhaps a derisive term. Okay, and you remember even the term Hebrew it was considered a disparaging remark about the people that were the shepherds. Okay, so I just am adding that in and everything. Steve, if you have to go and help Sunette, I understand. She's working at she was working at the table.
Oh, no, it's.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Anyway, but so let's go on.
Marty?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't have a way to wave my hand in here. My computer's really acting crazy.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. You
I
just
hate
go
to
ahead.
interrupt, but I was just thinking that as I'm reading this, could it be just that they're Pharaoh was thinking on his own thoughts. I mean, he was just calculating his own thoughts, that what if in reality all of this could happen, and these people are getting too big, and then will be a big, massive stoppage of work. That it was more considering his opponents than his powerful self.
Okay. That's good.
You know, reminiscent on the fact that he, considering what he is up against it, more than ha ha ha, I have more power than you. But maybe it is true. Maybe this is all reality.
Very good. Any other comments? Or should we read on? So I'm going to bounce back. Gail, if you would read verses 6, well, from verse 6
Okay,
and through 9. You might as well read 6 through 9,
okay.
and then we'll go from there.
Okay. And Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters among the people and its officers in that day, saying, "You shall not continue to give straw to the people to make bricks as yesterday and the day before. They shall go and collect straws for themselves. And you shall impose on them the quota of the bricks that they were making yesterday and the day before. You shall not subtract from it, because they're lazy. On account of this, they're crying, saying, 'Let us go and sacrifice to our God.' Let the work be heavy on the people, and let them do it, and let them not pay attention to the words that are a lie."
Okay. Comments? Well, the taskmasters and the foremen of the people, who is he referring to? Obviously, a taskmaster, you can, come on, get on with your work, you got to do it, et cetera, et cetera. What, foreman?
Egyptians, the Egyptians foreman, right?
Yes.
I would think.
What I found is that the word for foreman in the Hebrew is shoter. Is that right, Steve? Steve, you're muted.
Yeah, in that can mean any type of official. In modern Hebrew, it's a policeman in common usage. A shoter is has become the modern Hebrew word for policeman. So if that's the word that's used, yeah, it's so any type of official, because that root is used for various government related words. That's, I guess you could put it that way. Like a mishtar is a regime.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the word that's used then? Because I didn't see what verse are we on exactly?
This would be
Anagshim. Oh, Vetshotrav. Oh, he also mentions Nogshim. That's another word that's used. Nogshim ba'am Vetshotrav.
Right.
So yeah, the word Nogshim is not familiar to me, but based on the root, it's Nun Gimel Shin would imply some sort of closeness or proximity. So I would guess that Nogshim are people who are in close supervision.
Right.
They're not like the chief operating officers, but they're the people who are right down there, watching the assembly line.
Well, there's a play on the word.
I do have my book here of the, the entomological.
Right.
So just out of curiosity, I would like to look it up. You don't have to hold everything up for me.
Okay, Ricky
This'll
has her
take a
hand up.
minute.
Let me call
Yeah.
on Ricky and then raise your hand when you find out the information. Yes, Ricky.
I see two absolute parallels to this in more modern history. First of all, the taskmasters could be the capos. And I've put us into the Holocaust. Also,
Yes.
this whole paragraph makes me think of our American slavery system.
Ah, very good.
So that, well, I mean, I don't think I have to say much more. I mean, those are the things that popped up at me as this was read. That, especially that there's the shirkers, but let them call.
There
them
is commentary by Rabbi Plout, if you have the Plout edition in front of you, that he addresses this very thing, Ricky. Yes. One of the things that Sana mentions is that shoter, meaning foreman, derives from a stem meaning to write. And maybe these were the people that would also write down the punishments and, take just like they did in Nazi Germany. I don't know. Steve, what did you find out?
Yeah. Well, I found also that's true. That interestingly, star, and I had forgotten this. The same root again is a document or a bill. Okay, but the root that gives us the word for police, the modern word for police, also punish.
Right.
So these are the people who have the option of punishing if the rules are not followed. That's the implication, is these are, foremen, but they can also whip you if you don't do what they're telling you to do. And that's implied already by the root that's used. Now, I didn't look up the second one yet. I didn't have a chance to, but I am going to do that. Is nogshim.
Okay.
Nogshim was the second word, and I already have it here.
Okay.
And that is also actually, and I wasn't familiar with this meaning of this root, it can mean to press, drive, or oppress too.
Right.
So that's already applied in that there's a word in Amharic, okay, another Semitic language, where nagasha means to force or rule. Arabic, najasha, he roused and drove game. So it can mean, sort of hard pressing, tyrannizing, and forcing and pressing. So all these are not, just, supervisors who are, or officials. These are people who are actually right there on the scene and compelling you, whether you like it or not, on risk of punishment.
Okay. So now what we come to verse. Oh, yes, Ricky.
Well, we didn't talk about the idea that the taskmasters could be the Hebrews themselves, as in the capos.
Yes, no, but there is a lot written on that. As a matter of fact, there are some people who have written extensively on what happened to the Jewish people at the time of their enslavement in Egypt with the Nazi regime, and the Holocaust, and because even the way Hitler went about doing things that is almost verbatim as to what we've read about the Egyptians. And so they draw an analogy. Yes, Gail.
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase a little, and I'm going to take the Pharaoh's point of view here, okay?
Sure.
All right, so Moses and Aaron come, and they say, let us go because we want to worship our God. And they say, who is this guy? Okay. But when we get farther into verse 6, it's very apparent that he doesn't believe anything they've told him.
Right.
That it's a lie. I mean, he says it's a lie.
That's his interpretation.
And they're
right.
just lazy, and they're just looking for an excuse to take some time off work.
Time off.
And they're lazy. So that's really, and I can understand from the Pharaoh's point of view, this sounds, logical. Okay, they're lazy and they want some time off. And, it's a big lie. And forget the God thing, not interested.
That's right. That's a very good summation of it. Yes, Don.
This also introduces some level of sadistic impulse, because it's self-defeating to force the slaves to go out and gather straw, because that slow down the brick production. So they're it's a little disturbing. The taskmasters are gonna draw on their sadistic impulses in this case. It's not a very nice scene.
Except I think, again, that gives strength to separating Moses and Aaron from the people, because they've caused this to happen.
Right.
I think this is very clever of the Pharaoh in some ways.
Yeah, it is in that sense. Right.
Also, that people that are in power have to stress their power, have to exaggerate their power, even if it's to their own detriment. And I mean, we're seeing that in the world today. People are voting against their own needs. People are doing things just to maintain a position of power that they feel is more important than the actual thing here, in this case, bricks, or in, even in modern times, we see that people are voting against what is in their own best interest, just to maintain their position in the, if you want to call it the caste level, the CASTE level that they're positioned in. They have to stay at that level. They can't see themselves as going down or even staying equal.
And going, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Gail.
Oh, and referring to the Holocaust again, it was to the detriment of the Germans to maintain those concentration camps, because they took so much energy and resources to maintain that was one of the reasons they lost the war, because they were using trains and materials to enslave, people rather than fighting the war. Just, so people get a little crazy.
They can. Any other comments? So why is there an emphasis on straw?
Well, if I could go back for a second, Marty.
Oh, sure.
Based on what Gail was talking about. One of Adolf Hitler's insanity was the two words final solution. He was willing to give up everything to see that through, final solution. And that, out of the 12 million people that died under Hitler and were murdered, the 6 million were Jews because of the fact they were Jews and no other reason. And his goal was to eliminate every Jew on the face of the earth. That's what those words, final solution, applies to.
Yes.
And so he was more focused on doing that than anything else, eliminating the the Jewish experience.
Good point. Very good point. Yes, Ricky.
I just finished reading, I don't see, can you see? Cast,
Cast, yes.
yes, by Wilkerson. This fits into it, as does Nazi Germany, as does our American South or our America today.
Yes.
You know, absolutely. The maintenance of our own position up and down the ladder in India, the caste system, you know, the whole thing, it all fits right into that one paragraph I see. So, but anybody interested, this is a very interesting.
It is an excellent book.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. It may be worthwhile to digress a little bit, because it's not just the Jews that have suffered at the hands of oppression. Yes, we're discussing our story, but to be honest, when we look at the rest of the world, there are a lot of lessons here. How to be a good boss, how to be a good manager, how to be or let's put it this way, a better manager or better boss, how to be a better anyone who's in charge of other people and looking after them. And this is going to become a major theme in the rest of Torah. Okay. There are a number of discussions that come out of the Torah in the realm of law that has persisted to this day. This is one where Michael Mussman would be able to discuss it from his perspective. And it is this is a very important beginning of this discussion in response to basically a totalitarian state. Okay, how do you deal with that oppression? Okay, or a dictator. How do you deal with that? This has been a theme in Judaism that goes way beyond Torah. Comes up in Talmud. Steve would understand that. But also Samuel Gompers, who was Jewish, and the labor movement in the United States, and how people were treated. Yes, Steve.
No,
And that's
I
just
just,
one example.
and I think you're making a very good point, Marty. And I just happen to be reading a book right now that speaks to this topic. It's by Alan Dershowitz. If you've heard of it, you know.
Yes.
And it focuses on Genesis, actually, and a couple of stories within Genesis that are troubling from the justice standpoint, where God doesn't really seem to be playing fair. And, you know, his point, you know, I haven't finished the book yet, but, you know, what comes out in the introduction is it's sort of a thesis that, well, you know, the reason for the book, the reason for studying Torah is to challenge the observer. You know, you're not necessarily supposed to see, oh, well, God said this, so God always does right, so it must be right. But you're supposed to be thinking about justice all the time. Is this just? Is this not? And the rabbis always questioned it. There was very little that was off limits to the rabbis to discuss. That's what's unique about Judaism, is there aren't a whole lot of topics that are really off limits. It's okay to discuss. It's okay to question, and you do have to you know, think very hard and long about, you know, what justice really is. It isn't always spelled out in the story. Sometimes you have to
That's
think
right.
about the story a lot.
Exactly. Ricky,
Yeah, I just want to tell Steve, keep reading because it'll show you the evolution of the thought, the growth and the
Right.
changes through Genesis into.
yes.
So you've read this book.
Oh, yeah.
So before you make any more
Spoiler
in
alert.
that book.
Yeah. Yes, Gail.
One of my favorite authors and people for all kinds of reasons is Edward Abbey. And his quote that I always use is question authority. Question authority, always. And that was one of my reasons for converting, because you're allowed to question. You don't just take things because somebody said, do it. You question. And that's how you learn.
Right. So sometimes the answers you don't like. And sometimes they make you think about another question that has to be asked. And so that I think is good. But this is in my mind, I look at it as Genesis is interpersonal relationship, while Exodus is community oriented relationships. And so the justice that you see in Exodus is going to play out a little differently from it once we hit Exodus and the other books. The other thing is that if we refer to God as a father or parent, parents usually with the firstborn, they're pretty strict. Okay. And then they ease up on the second, third, and fourth because they say, oh, the other guy did it or the gal did it. And yeah, nothing really bad happened. But it's because you don't know the whole story. You want to first come over as the authority figure, and then you suddenly ease up. That's why I say this is also a book on parenting, and because God sort of softens his tone as time goes on. And so that too is an important consideration, another thread that goes through the books. But how you treat others is going to be, there's a reason why we're commanded to celebrate Passover. It's much more than just the story of a group of people, but but how you treat people in general is the most important concept here. What is, if you will, morally correct. Okay. And I think, there are lots of other examples. I'm surprised nobody mentioned Martin Luther King. And he quoted from the book of Exodus constantly. And you can see why he could relate to this. And I think that these are important messages, you know what I mean, about how we treat people. And I love the phrase, justice shall you pursue, which we will come to much later, many years from now, at the rate we're going. But it is critical in Judaism. It's a very critical concept in Judaism.
Well, it's a way of living a life. It teaches. It's a very great teacher of one conducting their entire life. And when one goes through a school from the kindergarten on up, you have teachers that really don't have very good teaching skills, and this may interrupt one's life and being living a full life. Also, parents not treating their children properly. It's a very You get into a lot of things, and this all comes from Exodus, from the Passover story, and why people didn't get it. You mentioned the Holocaust, which was just a terrible thing. That he would get this, Adolf Hitler would get this from Pharaoh, rather than look at the positive instead of the negative. It's quite complicated, actually. It's a great teacher one way or the other, Marty. It's a great discussion, a very important discussion.
Yeah, and this, I think the topics that we've mentioned, we will see over and over again as we go, after we get through all the plagues and everything, we're going to see this theme come up again and again and again. And that's going to be very important. Yes, David.
Wanted to add here that your very good point about how Exodus really is a prelude in a way to Martin Luther King and also to the American Transcendentalist movement in the 19th century. Henry David Thoreau, civil disobedience,
Yes.
Gandhi,
Yes.
all of this harks back to what we're talking about today.
Very good points. Very good points. Thank you. Any other comments about that? How about verse 9? By the way, I never answered, and we didn't discuss the straw. Why is straw emphasized in the making of bricks?
What holds it together?
Have you ever seen Adobe?
Yeah,
Yes.
Maybe it was harder to find than the mud.
Mhm.
Mud was easy, but straw they had to go grow. That was more work involved to get straw than there was to get just the
Well,
mud.
you actually have to mix all of that with the straw.
No, I know, but I'm saying before they were given the straw or something, but now they have to go gather the straw.
Right.
Maybe the straw was harder to gather than it was to gather the mud, which they put on. The
Oh,
straw.
yes,
That's
that
what I'm
part,
saying.
yes.
That they've added a burden to the task that was a heavy burden.
Actually, they have archaeologically, with this area around where the Sphinx is, they have uncovered a lot of areas where mud would have been mined in the Nile. Okay. Which is interesting.
Grow the straw. You had to grow the straw.
That's right. That's right. So there's so much. There's so much here. It's a major industry. Yes, Gail.
Steve, could you help me out with a Hebrew word here? In verse 9, it says, "Let the work be heavy." Moses' mouth was heavy, his tongue was heavy, the work is heavy. It seems like a word that's used a lot, and I'm just wondering if you could give us the root or some background.
Let me find where we are. Okay,
Okay.
You're talking about verse 9.
While
And
Steve
so
is
that's
looking up the
10.
word, I just want to finish the discussion on straw.
Super.
And the reason is that straw is very important in the manufacturing of adobe or other bricks.
Right.
It holds everything together. Otherwise, it crumbles in a very short period of time. So the amount of straw has to be measured out. I'm not a mason. I don't know how much straw versus mud or anything, but that's what it allows it to last a very long time as a sturdy structure.
Wasn't it made for the mortar, right? It was made to make mortar.
Yeah. But also the bricks.
Okay.
Right.
It holds on to water. Makes the material more pliable. Yes, Steve.
Yeah.
You found it.
Well, the root that's used, I'm answering Gail's question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The root that's used is kaf bet dalet, okay, which can mean physically heavy, but it can also, it's like any of these roots in Hebrew, it's sort of like a tree with branches. Sometimes the meanings that are derived from this root are kind of far reaching and not that obvious, because it's also kavod, which is honor. So in other words, if someone is very honorable, michubad, there's also a concept, it's related a little bit to that concept of heaviness. Heaviness is not only physically heavy, it's also important, and it's also substantial, okay? Anything substantial. And with the rabbi, we were referring to this mode of Talmudic logic before, min hakal el hakaved, which literally means from the light to the heavy, which means you take a minor sort of circumstance and you draw conclusions about a more major circumstance. Now, I don't know if that at all answers your question, or that's what you were in fact asking.
It's just that word heavy is used a lot in the Torah, particularly in this, it talks about heavy hail, and Moses' tongue was heavy, and it's just seems interesting that, and like you say, evidently it has a lot of meaning. So
well, the Hebrew is actually a very efficient language.
Right.
So if there's a root that can be used, that root is found in a lot of words, a lot of which you wouldn't necessarily connect. That makes the language much more efficient. They don't have to create a lot of words de novo. A lot of words are just built on other words.
right, that's what they kept telling me. That's what they kept telling me at Ulpan.
Yeah.
And so you just go back, it's like almost geometrical or mathematical. You can go back to these three magic little letters and plug it in all sorts of different ways, and you get all these different words from it that have sort of an intuitive connection, but not always that obvious a connection.
Okay. Yes, Don.
If I may, I'm relating very strongly to this discussion of work and because when I got out of the Air Force, I ended up managing a couple of engineering factories in the UK, and we had about 1,000 people and 7 militant unions, and so it got pretty hot and heavy among the supervisors of forming the unions. And I remember some of the disputes and discussions got down to very personal, intimate levels. I remember one welder who, he and his wife, to get by, had taken in a boarder, and the boarder took a fancy to his wife, and so they were, boarder and the wife were occupying the bedroom upstairs, and the welder had to sleep on the couch downstairs, so he was chronically late. And he'd punch and leave all the time, and finally the foreman fired him. And then that escalated up to the shop stewards, the national union. And so, I'm looking at the scene and Hebrews making bricks and having to go out and get their own stuff. And somehow, after all these centuries, it just relates, and it hasn't really changed. The sadism and the control issues and all of that stuff. So the Torah, and I did used to refer back to Torah principles in some of these decisions. Still relates after all those centuries. Nothing has changed. It's kind of rambling on there, but
No, but what you're saying is true, that you have, maybe that's why it's important enough to celebrate Passover every year to remind all of us of why it's important, or why this discussion is so critical. It's okay to recite the story and get on with the eating, but if we added this type of discussion to the Haggadah, it would change a lot of it would change the Passover from a celebration to a study session, because this would come up because of the discussions that we're having.
It would also get the matzo ball soup cold.
Yes, I was thinking about that, but no, but we forget what in our haste. One year, I remember doing this at home, when we were discussing, instead of just reading the story, I said to everyone, let's put the books aside. What does the Passover mean to you as an individual? And the discussions were from all different directions, and it sort of answered all the 4 questions. It answered a whole bunch of things because it personalized the holiday, and we often forget about that. So I just wanted to say that that's what we're doing in this process. What does it mean to us? How has this story affected?
How would you say that in one word? How could you sum that up in one word, Marty?
Help. Help.
One word.
I can't do it in one word. But I think it's a very important, this whole story that we're embarking on. This is where the story begins.
To me, one word would be freedom. If I had to use one word, and you're right. You can't sum it up in one word or 10 words. It's an ongoing. It would be a encyclopedia of information. But if you were forced into using one word, the one word for me would be freedom.
Okay, that's good. But other people will use other words.
Absolutely.
Yes, Gail.
I'd say power. Power. And that's on both sides, not just one.
Yes, I understand.
Power.
It's the tension between both sides. There are a lot of issues but it's the tension as to the power versus the powerless, and that you come up with better forms of justice. Yes, Vicky, you were going to say something, I thought. Okay. So should we try to any comments about verse 9 that anyone wants to make about the punishments? Let heavier work be laid upon the men. Let them keep it and not pay attention to deceitful promises. Any comments about that statement or not? He's punishing. Pharaoh is going to be punishing the slaves.
He's also sort of arguing that idleness is the devil's workshop, that the reason people are coming up with all these imaginative complaints is because they're not working hard enough. So let's give them some more work so they're not distracted.
Very good. Very good. So David, you haven't read yet today.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
Please.
And the taskmasters of the people went out, and their officers, and they spoke to the people, saying, "Thus saith Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go yourselves, get you straw wherever you can find it, for none of your work shall be diminished. So the people were scattered abroad throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. And the taskmasters were urgent, saying, fulfill your work, your daily task, as when there was straw. And the officers of the children of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten, saying, wherefore have we not fulfilled your appointed task in making great growth yesterday and today as heretofore?
Okay, let's stop at that point. And any comments about what David just read? I know there's a difference between Old English and New English, and more modern English. So it becomes, it's you may have it written a little differently in front of you. So the taskmasters and the foremen are going to the people and they're saying, this is what the Pharaoh said you need to do. So where would you find straw? You may get run to a farm and get it from hay, you know, for dried grass and like that. But where else can you find straw?
In fields after they've taken the crop, what's left?
Sure. Where else?
Well, not in the desert.
Well, okay, then that's true. But what is it that, what is straw? Dried grass.
Mhm.
Okay. What other plants are in the grass family?
Papyrus? Is papyrus in the grass family?
Well, papyrus is yes. What else?
Well, wheat, barley, all of the grains.
The reeds.
Right.
Okay, and it depends on the time of year. This becomes a tremendous difficult task because if they now have to find it on their own, they're going to have to go far and wide and still make that number, the same number of bricks. This is almost an impossible task. Okay, this is piling on an extreme amount of labor. Day one, you may find it very close by, but then day two, you're going to have to go further out to find it. Yes, Steve.
The whole idea is it's supposed to be an impossible task.
That's right.
The idea is giving the taskmasters an excuse to punish, kind of like in the military. We were talking about the military before. A favorite old technique of the master sergeant would be clean out the latrine with a toothbrush. You know, is that really possible, or is that just designed to be impossible?
Right.
So, same task here.
Yeah, it's a very good analogy, Steve. Any other comments on this, what we've read? Go ahead, Gail.
Another aspect of power is, oh, how was I going to say that? Never mind, I'll come back.
Well, there are different types of power. Okay.
Oh, I know what I was going to say.
Go ahead. Yes.
If you can humiliate the opposition, goes a long ways to assuming or keeping power, is to humiliate or make fun of, you know, the opposition. So
yes.
they're out there scrabbling around for straw, you know, that's kind of a.
Keep this in mind when we read the rest of the plagues. What are they going to wind up doing? Okay. It's a very important comment that Gail is making.
Break down the will of a person, you know?
Yes.
And that, I think that's one of the lessons that Judaism teaches us, is not just the very opposite, to be kind to people, to be sweet and kind and loving, rather than to break the will of a person.
There you go. And this occurs in all forms of slavery. And you can think of it not just with groups of people, it can be in business, et cetera, how you treat your workers. Okay.
What's that divide and conquer?
Yes, that
Divide and
too.
conquer, yeah. And
That
that's,
is
you know, once you've divided a group of people, you're really on your way.
So let's see what unfolds with verse 15. Gail, would you like to do a little reading of verse 15 through 18?
Okay. And the officers of the children of Israel came and cried to Pharaoh, saying, "Why do you do a thing like this to your servants? Straw isn't given to your servants, and they say to us, 'Make bricks.' And here your servants are beaten, and it's your people's sin." And he said, "You're lazy, lazy. On account of this, you're saying, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.' And now go to work. The straw will not be given to you, and you shall give the quota of bricks." Exclamation mark.
And this is why Gail is saying divide and conquer. And Steve has alluded to it too. The concept is if the punishment is not being leveled against Moses and Aaron, the punishment is being laid upon the slaves, so that they are going to lose faith, as was pointed out, lose faith in the eyes, in their, how could Moses and Aaron do all of these things to us? Any other comments?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, actually, this someone mentioned before that perhaps some of these foreman taskmasters are actually like capos.
Yes,
And
it
it
really
seems
did.
like perhaps they are, because here in this very last verse, coming as, you know, they've been trying to get the people to collect straw. Now they're coming to Pharaoh and they're saying, "This is ridiculous.
That's right.
You know, this is going too far. And we're just whipping the people, but the work isn't getting done." So they're actually kind of in a way being advocates on behalf of the children of Israel, the slaves. So, you know, maybe they are capos. You know, they're because they're, you know, they're saying, "No, we can't keep doing this because it's exercise in futility. You're just finding a way for us to punish them." So then Pharaoh throws them away and just says, "You're all lazy. You're all lazy." You know,
we can see Pharaoh's answer to this and if somebody would read verses 19 through 23.
I'll read for a change.
Okay.
The foremen of the Israelites found themselves in trouble because of the order, "You must not reduce your daily quantity of bricks." As they left Pharaoh's presence, they came upon Moses and Aaron standing in their path, and they said to them, "May the Lord look upon you and punish you for making us loathsome to Pharaoh and his courtiers, putting a sword in their hands to slay us." Then Moses returned to the Lord and said, "O Lord, why did you bring harm upon this people? Why did you send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has dealt worse with his people, and still you have not delivered your people."
Okay.
That's a lot.
Comments? This answers a lot of the questions we have raised. Okay. And in addition to what Steve mentioned about the taskmasters and foremen, you know, raising these questions, but also the people, what you've done. Look what you've done to us. We've suffered more. So let's look at this suffering. how much suffering does one have to, it reminds me of a song, okay? How many roads,
Mr. Manuel.
and all the different verses to the song. How much, so let's say, how much suffering does someone have to go through for us to take note? And how much suffering does someone have to go through to for that person to be recognized that they're still a man or a woman or a child,
The
a
answer is
foreigner?
blowing in the wind.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right. And it's something that these were messages that were loud and clear as we went through our teen years and teens and 20s with the folk songs of that time period. And they all had similar messages that dovetail very much into what we're discussing. Yes, Gail?
Well, you also have to keep in mind that the people hadn't gone to Pharaoh and asked for time off of work. They had no say in it.
That's right.
So no wonder they're upset.
I'm surprised nobody has said, why are these people being used as pawns?
Yes, exactly. Does make us question God sometimes.
We can, but we have to raise the question, is it fair? Don, I'm stealing your thunder right now. But why, why is it necessary to do all of this?
Well, it isn't always, but sometimes.
It isn't, but why do the people have to suffer so greatly before somebody, let's put it this way, someone who's human, okay, recognize it as this is wrong?
It's the idea of taking a people, whether it's our people or the blacks in the early part of the 20th century up until recently, and taking an entire people and saying, you are not as good as the rest of us who are in power. And you will be tortured and treated as lesser than real people. And this is, I think, this is part of the idea, as Gail says, of power, part of the idea of the supremacy of one race over another, just to the fact that some people will say, we are better than you. This is a big thing that persists to this day, I think.
Yes, it does. It does. I agree. Yes, Gail?
I think the only way some of these issues can be taken care of finally, and I'm thinking about African Americans in particular, is if everybody who's white, and I'm generalizing, knew or had either a relative or a close friend who was African American, it's difficult to see things from the other guy's viewpoint. I'm making this very simple. Until things become personal and they affect you directly, you don't give a damn.
There it is.
And you have to make people wake up and relate. And until they do, it's not going to happen. Just not. That's why I think intermarriage is is a wonderful thing, because
that's why I have to agree with what Gail just said. Is just take a stand and make people notice. And I think I've said this for some time, that the Jews in this country could take a great lesson. The Jewish community, let me say it that way, can take a great lesson from the Black community in that respect. When something happens in the Jewish community, they talk about it. but it's not loud enough. It's not grand enough. When something happens in the Black community, it's really blown up, so people notice. That's what the Jewish community does not do. And nothing is going to happen. The Jews will not be recognized until something like that happens. Now, I'm not talking about, burning or destroying property or pulling down statues, nothing like that. But I certainly don't have the answer. But what I'm stating is something has to happen big, something noticeable.
Building on what Gail.
Unfortunately, that's very true.
Building
Yes,
on what-
several people have had their hands up. Ladies, is it okay to let David go first, and then I'll go to Ricky and back to Gail?
Okay, building on what, thanks, Gail. Building on what Gail and Michael and others have been saying, there is a book that describes, if you really want to see how another race lives, you can actually become a member of that race. The book is called Black Like Me, and it's something that both Wendy and I read when we were in college. It is still extremely, extremely important in understanding how another people live and the problems that they have.
Okay, yes, Ricky.
But that's impossible for the African American community because you just look at them and you know they are different. They are lesser. That's what's been,
It's been drummed into people's minds.
Because there's one story in here where a teacher trying to teach this lesson to her class of all white students, what it's like to be discriminated against for something that you cannot change and you have no control over, is she has blue-eyed kids and brown-eyed kids.
Yeah.
And the brown-eyed kids are bad and stupid and lazy and blah, blah, blah. And the blue-eyed kids, and they all act their roles. And then she reverses them. The blue-eyed kids are now stupid and lazy, and they act the new roles. So, but see, that's the disadvantage that is happening in our society with the African American, is that he can't pretend to be blue-eyed or black-eyed. He's black, his skin gives him away. Jews can, we're in a different thing, but we're down there. But Asians, it's the eyes. The groups that have something that physically cannot be changed stay subjugated because they can always be, highlighted, pinpointed, and kept down.
One of the things I would just like to point out in our discussions, unintentionally, we leave out other groups in this discussion. Native Americans.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, I said Asians and
or the first people. There goes. You can use number of different ways, and they have been. We've done it not just racially. We have done it culturally. There are a lot of examples of this. It doesn't mean that you have to give up everything, but you have to be sensitized to this. I wrote a short story about this, a true story about first contact, close contact with a Black person. And it was, he was just a very kind man. But I had to figure out the answer to a question. Why are you Black? And the only thing I could come up with in my childhood understanding, I was very young at the time, I asked him, why, how did this happen? Was the fire very hot? How else would you be charred like this? I didn't use the word charred, I did, but black from the fire. And that was a very naive question. But the answer was, this is the way I was born. Simple.
Mhm.
Didn't matter. This guy was very kind to me. And I said, oh, okay. Now let's get back to our discussions about, now I understand Willie Mays and so many other people. This is the way they are. They're good people too.
Mhm.
And so at a very young age, I learned that type of experience. Yes, go ahead, Gail.
Michael, I want to relate a little true story that happened right here in Green Valley that kind of gives you hope. It was a bright, wonderful evening. Remember when the 11 people were shot to death in Pittsburgh? Remember that?
Mhm.
And the community here turned out that evening when the rabbi gave a little, I guess, a memorial service or whatever you want to call it. The temple was jammed full.
Yes.
But people who had nothing to do with the temple. Remember that, Ruth Ann? I mean,
Oh,
we were
yeah.
packed. There was standing room only.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. So again, when you can personalize it, they know somebody who blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
It has to be personalized. It's just, if you don't relate, it doesn't work. Just doesn't.
Excellent point, Gail. On that note, next week we will begin chapter 6. Okay.
Mhm.
So any other comments or that anyone wants to make? I know we ran over a little bit, but I just thought that this discussion was very important at this time because it's the mindset that we're going to be in as we read through Exodus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Gail and I have talked about, us versus them. It's an us versus them
Should never
society.
be.
And whoever the them is, they're not us. There's lots of thems. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah,
It's an excellent way of putting it. Good points.
it's real simple.
That's why I'm proud to be with you guys. We, because of the way we tend to look at the world. I'm very proud.
Well, I just finished another book, Stettel, but that with taking it to the Jews, that we frequently bring it back to. For them, usually there's something different. They look different, they eat different, their religion is different, they dress different, whatever it is, it's different.
Sure.
And a lot of societies, a lot of people try to assimilate in so that they're not different.
Exactly.
Jews, on the other hand, really worked hard to keep their traditions and customs and food and dress and blah, blah, blah. So continually looked different to the us. So
yes,
in a way, we almost perpetrated our own, the prejudice against us
yeah.
by insisting that we keep who we are. And that makes us continue to be the other.
Correct.
So, I mean, it's you can't blame the Jew for being the scapegoat, but yet the Jew keeps himself in that role by insisting on being the obvious Jew.
Okay, good. Another good point. Another good point. Any announcements, Ruth Ann?
Nope, just have a quiet week. It's a good week. Just if you want to come to bagel breakfast, please make your reservation.
RSVP, so
RSVP, yep.
Before I go into surgery.
Yeah, please.
Yes, and I will relay
As soon as
that
possible.
message to Sue, Ricky.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we need the RSVPs. We're up to about 45, and we are going to try to do a little bit more social distancing. So it's cutting down on the numbers greatly. So we.
Okay. By the way, Ricky, while I have you on the phone, I'm going to tell Sue to pick you up a little earlier. She's a slow driver.
I know that. I noticed that.
And so what may take some of us 30 minutes or 40 minutes.
Well, I was giving her an hour.
Okay.
I was giving her an
She may
hour.
come a little bit beforehand.
Yeah,
But
she tends.
okay.
I
Okay.
understand
Best
that.
of luck, Ricky. Best of luck.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's just hope the board meeting is over by then, but it should be.
Yeah.
just
Okay.
leave. We'll try to make it fast.
Okay. I think Suzanne wants to say something. Yes.
You know, my little claim to fame of not name dropping, when Steve showed his book on Alan Dershowitz, excuse me, when I lived back in Massachusetts, we lived in the same town, and I was an elected official in that town. So he was one of my constituents. I have no idea if he voted for me. I hope.
No, but it is a coincidence. Yeah,
Yeah, so
that is
6
cool.
degrees of,
Interesting.
separation.
Well, he's a law professor at Harvard, so that was
Yeah,
Yeah, we had a lot of famous people in that town.
yeah.
And and a lot of Harvard people lived in that town.
Oh.
I don't know if he's there now. It was Wayland, Massachusetts. So
Very interesting.
I lived in the servants' quarters.
Oh, get out of here.
Okay. Oh, Marty, one just thing to mark down on your calendars, March 20th, right, Michael?
I guess.
Yep, March 20th, Michael G is going to do a concert at the temple. And yes, Michael, the sax player is fine.
You found that out?
Yes, I did.
All right.
So that's fine. And and another thing, if you haven't gotten the invitation to Torah studies by Thursday, somebody please let me know, because one day flows into the next and I forget.
Okay, we'll give you a break this time. The date the rabbi gave for the lecture series that he's going to have on morality and ethics. Do you remember what day he said that was going to be?
I think he's talking about the fourth Thursday of the month.
Fourth Thursday.
February, right?
And
So
I don't understand why he wants to do it the fourth Thursday of the month, but
Hey,
he wanted time off. And that was supposed to be his week that he had off, but he wants to do it
good
then.
no.
So, he wanted to be able to travel and do what, and that's why the services worked out perfectly, because it gave him some time there. But he said it, I did not.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you all,
Thank
and have a great week. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat.
sleep through it on pain pills. Actually, I'm going to get through it.